Good afternoon, and welcome to the International Poetry Forum. And welcome back to the International Poetry Forum. There we go. Just by a show of fans, who has been to a performance at the forum in the past? Oh, wonderful. This is so exciting. I was floored. My name is Jay Kreffenstedt. I'm the new director of the forum. I was floored 2 years ago when Sam asked me to take over and revive this organization. Thanks to my wife, we sort of threw everything into this with this great network of support. But it's only now, 2 years later, in front of an audience of 500, that I finally remembered I'm terrified of audiences. Luckily, most poets are in the same boat, so I'm in good company. But I was speaking with my sister, who likes to poke fun, and she asked how many RSVPs. I said we have full house, full RSVPs. And she said, do they know they're going to a poetry reading? I said, it's Sam. She knows Sam, and she said, oh, that makes sense. But for those of you who are new, to give you a little bit of history, the International Poetry Forum started really almost exactly 60 years ago. In 1964, Sam Hazo invited W.H. Auden to Pittsburgh to give a reading. And in his introductory remarks, Dr. Hazo, who was then a young professor of English at Duquesne, said, wouldn't it be a swell idea if we could get a speaker series where we brought in not only poets, but also actors, musicians, anyone who takes poetry seriously as a spoken medium. 2 years later, that vision became a reality. In 1966, Archibald MacLeish, then one of the most significant figures in American letters, came to this very stage to give the inaugural reading to a sold-out house. You imagine what Pittsburgh looked like in 1966, what Sam was up against. I'm sure many of you will have heard the story that in his very first year of operation, Dr. Hazo received a phone call from Harrisburg asking about chickens in Pittsburgh, wanting to know what was going on with the international poultry farm he was getting going. But really, against all odds, he succeeded. And 2 decades after his first performance, our good friend Archibald wrote that there were 2 centers of energy in the United States for poetry readings. One was the 92nd Street Y in New York, and the other was the International Poetry Forum in Pittsburgh. For a period of 43 years, remarkably all under Sam's leadership, about 800 poets and performers came to Pittsburgh. It really makes a position to being one of the most significant reading series in the country. And what I love about Sam is the prestige of that was never important to him, except insofar as it helped Pittsburgh's image on the national stage, and insofar as it helped high school students to feel like they're growing up in a city where you could be a poet. So we are just remarkably happy to be able to bring this back, to revive our reading series, to revive our high school outreach programs. It has just been such a joy. We owe many thanks. I'd just like to say 5 quick thanks right now. First is to Sam and to the entire Hazo family, those who are with us, those who have passed, especially Mrs. Hazo, who made so much possible, to Sam's son, Sam, who brings beautiful music into this world. So thank you very much to the entire Hazo family. The second thanks is to this venue. The forum initially launched under sponsorship of Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh and the Mellon Educational and Charitable Trust. And we would just like to say thank you again for hosting us today. An extension of that, thank you to Dawn and the wonderful team who come over from the Media Center at Duquesne. Dawn has done readings for the International Poetry Forum since 1982. He's done readings for performers like Seamus Heaney, James Earl Jones, just this incredible list. He saw his wife for the first time at a Seamus Heaney reading in this very room. So thank you to the venue, and thank you to everyone. Thank you to all the volunteers who have made this day possible. The third thanks is to our incredible network of supporters, our institutional supporters for the continued support of the LZH Hillman Foundation, Grable Foundation for supporting our reading series and high school programs, respectively, and an enormous thank you to just the incredible network of individual supporters. As a 501c3 organization, it's because of you that we're able to exist. So thank you very much for your support. The fourth quick thanks is to my parents and my wife, 2/3 of whom are already teary-eyed. So thank you, Mom, Dad, and Christina for all of your support the past few years. The final thanks is to the audience here. You look back at the comments from Gwendolyn Brooks, from Archibald MacLeish, from James Earl Jones. Many of these figures describe their time in Pittsburgh as one of, or their very favorite experience with poetry. Sam created something really special here. And I can share the individual lines with the individuals who are interested later, but the gist of what most people said is Pittsburgh's a rare city where you have this incredible audience that loves poetry without being snooty, which I think is a wonderful reputation to have. So enormous thank you to the audience, and thank you to the teachers. If you're a teacher and we've not spoken yet, I would love to speak. Thank you for the teachers. Thank you to the students who are here. Thank you to our volunteers. And to thank the audience is, again, in a way to thank Sam, because one of the reasons poetry is so important in Pittsburgh is because of him. So to help us thank Sam and introduce him, we're going to bring up Janine Molinaro, who is the chair and professor of English at La Roche University. She has written a wonderful biography of Sam's life called Before the Pen Runs Dry, which I highly recommend you read. But once again, if you'll help me thank Sam and welcome to the stage, Janine. Thank you very much.
The International Poetry Forum is back, and I am stoked about that. Thank you all so much for celebrating by coming here today to hear Bob Haas and Sam Hazo do their thing. And please join me in thanking Jake Greffenstedt for his tireless work over the past year to make this day possible. As Jake said, my name is Janine Molinaro. I teach English at La Roche University, but more importantly, I am one of Sam Hazo's former students from Duquesne and an International Poetry Forum superfan. As I contemplated being back in this lovely venue for the relaunch of the forum today, I was flooded with really wonderful memories from my days as a student in Dr. Hazo's poetry classes in the 1980s. On the first day of every semester, Dr. Hazo would encourage us to attend the poetry forums. Now, he didn't mandate it, he didn't require it on the syllabus, so it wasn't official, but as his students, we knew for sure that our attendance was expected at the forums. So I remember we chose our seats very strategically the first time we came here. We were actually in one of the top rows up there, super close to the exit. Yes, we were planning our escape route in case the reading was really boring. As students, and hear me out here, as students, we thought we were justifiably fearful of something taking place in a building called a lecture hall. We thought it just sounded really boring. It had the potential to be terrible. Now, I don't remember exactly who the featured poet was that first night, but I'm happy to report that we never once had to put our escape plan into action. Instead, all of us future poets and writers and English teachers sat completely enraptured by every single poet and performer on this stage. We were hooked from the very start. And on certain evenings, Sam even invited his students to attend the reception after the reading. Now, those evenings were particularly special for us because on those nights, we got to witness our professor acting like just a normal person. Not a poet, not a teacher, just a guy walking around, eating hors d'oeuvres, and talking to people. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I thought to myself, I want to do what he's doing, hobnobbing with poets, eating canapes in places called lecture halls. that was definitely for me. So here I am, celebrating 38 years as a teacher and poetry lover. And I think that if you had told that really insecure 19-year-old sitting way at the top by the exit that I would be here in 2024 introducing Sam Hazo for the relaunch of the International Poetry Forum, I would have thought you were completely bonkers. And yet, here we are. Being an educator has brought me so much joy over the years, and I have my dear friend Sam Hazo and the International Poetry Forum to thank for that. And I am just one of thousands of people who have been inspired by Sam's prolific work in the literary arts. So let me tell you a little bit about this man's remarkable career. Dr. Sam Hazo is the McNulty Distinguished Professor of English Emeritus at Duquesne University, where he devoted 43 years to speaking poetic truths and inspiring his students to find our own voices so we could speak our poetic truths. He has authored over 60 books of poetry, fiction, plays, essays, and translations. In the past year alone, this irrepressible nonagenarian has published 2 new volumes of poetry, The Treachery of Luck and Becoming Done. Now, my job description as an English professor mandates that I now launch into an erudite commentary about the stylistic and technical brilliance of Sam's poetry. But I'm going to forego that temptation today because Sam insists that poems should speak for themselves. If you've read or heard his work, you know that his certainly do. Sam's CV is bursting with almost an embarrassing number of accolades that he would be mortified if I enumerated here. So I'm just going to mention a few of my favorites. He was recognized twice as Pittsburgh's Man of the Year in Arts, and he received the Forbes Medal for Outstanding Cultural Contributions to Western Pennsylvania. He served as Pennsylvania's first and only Poet Laureate for 10 years and received the Griffin Award for Creative Writing from his alma mater, the University of Notre Dame. Last year, he was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Convivium Journal for Arts, Arts, Culture, and Testimony. And La Pièce de Résistance, in April of this year, Sam received the very prestigious Commonwealth Award of Distinguished Service in Literature. The Commonwealth Awards were established in 1979 to reward and encourage the best of human performance worldwide, recognizing outstanding achievement in 8 categories: the dramatic arts, literature, science, invention, mass communication, public service, government, and sociology. Past recipients in literature include some names you might just recognize: Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Tennessee Williams, Adrienne Rich, Toni Morrison, Rita Dove, Arthur Miller, August Wilson, Seamus Heaney, Joyce Carol Oates, Amy Tan, and now our very own Samuel Hazo. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the Carnegie Lecture Hall stage, Samuel Hazo.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Janine for that more than generous introduction. I'd also like to say it's a pleasure to appear on the stage with a wonderful poet, Bob Hass. He's done wonders for literature at Penn West, Edinburgh, and I think the state of Pennsylvania is the better for him. I'd also like to say a word about Jake Greffenstedt. I had entirely given up the idea of finding a director for the Poetry Forum, and suddenly Mike Aquilina, who was in the audience, brought Jake to the house. No preparation, nothing. Suddenly I'm meeting a man who has 2 degrees from the University of Notre Dame, 1 degree from Shanghai, a doctorate from Cambridge University. He's fluent in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And he loves poetry. His family is a Pittsburgh family of long standing, and he's interested in reviving the Poetry Forum. He just walked in the front door. So I have great hopes. I think he'll do wonders for the Poetry Forum, and I really urge you to support him in any way that you can. And finally, I'd like, if I may, to dedicate this, at least my portion of this program, to my wife. The Poetry Forum was as dear to her as it was to me. And she made a remark to me 1 month before we launched the Poetry Forum in this very hall. She reminded me of something. And she said, when you go to the meeting, don't forget to tell them this. I'm not going to tell you what it was. But I did remember, and at the meeting, I said that, and I can tell you in all truth, the Poetry Forum would not have happened if she had not reminded me to say that. Isn't that interesting? Now the program. We speak as people in motion speak, more sure of what's behind us than ahead, but going anyway, trying to see beyond the world we see. We see that seeing's dangerous. Our props collapse. Religion, custom, law, the dream called government. Nothing sustains us but our eyes, and what our eyes, by saying nothing, say. No wonder Timmerman could claim for all of us, I'm more at home in subjects now, not countries. Before the real frontiers, our passports are invalid. They tell us how we're called, but never who we are. And who we are is the mystery. The pilgrim in us has no resorts. He, encowled within a fuselage, takes us with him when he goes. We land, speak languages we almost understand, and trust in strangers as the best of friends, and for a time they are. Years afterward, we feel a bond with them so indestructible that we're amazed. If they should die, we'd grieve for them, the way those old Cuban fishermen grieved for Hemingway because he fished the Gulf they fished and called them friends. With nothing else to offer him, they gave the bronze propellers of their very boats to make his statue in the plaza of Kohimar. For us, the best memorials are what we heard or read en route. He's old, but still in life. Nothing but a heart attack killed poor old Christophine. But why in that box she's so swell up? Cruelty's a mystery and a waste of pain. I want a dog that makes you think when you look at him. El Cordobés es un hombre muy valiente. Each word's a time, each time's a place. Each place is where a time repeats itself because a word returns us there. Crisscrossing through the universe the way that lightning diagrams the sky, we're all companions of the road at different altitudes. Here in my speeding house, below the speeding stars, I'm turning into language from a pen, while you're confiding in some passenger you'll never see again. The quiet bronze of words remembers us. It says we were, we are, we will be. I have to reach back a long way for this next poem. A group of friends had invited my wife to join them on a trip to Italy. She had helped them plan it, and almost the day before they left, they said, "Marianne, you have to come with us." Well, she had never been away from us. My son was about 8 years old at that time, and I was about 13. At any rate, she decided to go. And after the first week, the house seemed to get emptier and emptier. And I said, "Sam, why don't we give Mom a call?" So she was in Florence. I called. "Pronto?" I said, "May I speak to Mrs. Hazo?" "Aspetta. She's no here." I said, "She's with the group." "Ah, perdóneme, señor." She puts her on the phone. She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing's wrong. We just wanted to hear your voice, that's all." And I said, "Here, Sam, you want to say hello to your mom?" I said, "Come on, Sam, it's long distance." "I'll write her a letter." Which he did. We mailed the letter to the hotel, and I figured he'll never get it, but 2 weeks after she comes back, she gets this letter, return to sender. It made the whole trip worthwhile. Dear Mom, I loved you before you left. I love you while you're away, and I'll love you when you come back. I have a little cold, but I'm trying to get better. Dad and I almost nearly can't get along without you. That was the letter. This poem is called Florence by Proxy. I'd like to dedicate it to Megan. Where are you? October's ochre changes everything to Italy. Sun-painted walls remember villas near Fiesole. I've never seen Fiesole. Someday I will, and it will seem a memory of noon in the United States when I became a Florentine because the sun bewildered me. Who among the Florentines is listening? Who else but me, who sees in the Italians the human race that Goethe saw? Today their cops are commodores, their Fiats, weapons and their whizzing duels on the road, their shoes and gloves, the very renaissance of calf. Tribal to the death, they swear by their mothers, breastfeed their sons wherever, prefer their pasta 3/4 cooked, and sing whatever, whenever. Mistaken for Italian half my life, I'm of the tribe. If it's Italian to speak in tears before goodbyes, I qualify. If it's Italian to choose tomatoes one by one, I qualify. If it's Italian to laugh when no one else is laughing, or to whistle at the wheel, I qualify. One murmur in Italian soothes the Florentine in me that French confuses, German contradicts, and Spanish misses by a hair. One murmur, and I feel what Goethe felt when Florence wounded him with Italy, though Goethe spent not quite 3 hours there. This is part of another Europe, Ireland. I've been to Ireland twice. And visiting Ireland is not just visiting the country. I mean, it's visiting the history, the poetry, the drama, the fiction, all that. It's all part of it. The thing we forget, the Irish don't, but we do, is the Irish lived under the British heel for 800 years. 800 years. They were persecuted, imprisoned, abused, and starved. It's an old tactic used by the powerful against the powerless. The British starved the Irish. You saw the same thing at the Warsaw Ghetto. You see the same thing now every day against the Palestinian people in Gaza. It goes on. But the Irish rebellion succeeded. They had great leaders in Patrick Pearse, Sean McDermott, Michael Collins. Established in 1918 the Free State of Ireland, and in 1922 the Irish Republic. Eamon de Valera. I can't forget there was a film made of Kennedy when he returned to Ireland in 1963. He wanted to go, but the staff said, "You don't have to go, Jack. Every Irish Catholic vote in America now. Why do you have to go there?" He said, "I want to go." Well, he went. He visited Mrs. Mary Ryan in New Ross, where he's from, and he said, "Mrs. Ryan, I have to leave because your ambassador is going to take me back to Dublin." She said, "Oh, pay no attention to him." And she took him by the arm and led him into the house. But when he spoke, he quoted the famous ballad, "We are the boys from Wexford who fought with heart and hand to break in twain the galling chain and free our native land." And who is sitting in the first row? Eamon de Valera. This poem is called "The Real Reason for Going is Not Just to Get There." Killarney's maps are for the unredeemed. The hidden land awaits the stumblers and the temporarily confused who find their destinations as they go. In Dingle, there's a history, bone final as the faith that founded Gallerus. All that remains is what was there when Gallerus began: God, man, sheep, and stone, and stone, and stone. Dingles ago, the starvers saw their lips turn green from chewing grass before they famished in their beds. Their hovels bleached like tombs, unroofed and riven by the sea. If only all the stones were beige or marble white. Their fading grays seem unforgiving as a fate that only wit or tears or immigration can defeat. Sheep graze over graves. Loud gulls convene on garbage dumps. In Galway, Cashel, and Tralee, I fish the air for what it is that makes the Irish Irish. Is it Seamus quoting Sweeney's prayer in Howth and telling me of Hopkins the convert buried in Glasnevin? Is it how it sounds to sing the music in a name? Skibbereen, Balbriggan, Kilbeggan, Bunratty, Listowel, Duncannon, Fermanagh, and Ballyconneely? Is it Joyce's map of metaphors that makes all Dublin mythical as Greece? Is it cairns of uniambic and unrhyming rocks transformed by hand into the perfect poem of a wall? Is it the priest near death who whispered, "Give my love to Roscommon," and the horses of Roscommon? Is it because the Irish pray alike for the Pope, our Bishop Eamon, and Ned O'Toole, late of Moycullen? Inside God's house or out, their sadder smiles say the world, if given time, will break your heart. With such a creed, they should believe in nothing but the wisdom of suspicion. Instead, they say, "Please God," and fare ahead regardless of the odds to prove that life and God deserve at least some trust, some fearlessness, some courtesy. I'd like now to turn to the only subjects that are the only ones that really are of interest: poems about gender and about love. Poems about gender, they always have a different meaning behind what you hear. I'll never forget one time I was visiting some people and they were playing blackjack. And the woman reminded her husband of her old girlfriend, and She said, was she good at blackjack? He said, she was very, 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 very good. And she said, that's one very too many. You might hear that kind of double entendre in this poem. It's called One-Liners or Less. What made Elizabeth say, I'm not attractive to men? Or Patty say, my brother is so good, he's boring. Or Dolores in her 80s say, I want more birthdays, but I don't want to celebrate them. Or Barbara, once divorced, admit, the world is run by couples. Such frankness in some women makes the truth less fearsome if admitted when faced, and there's a lighter side as well. Watching his wife peruse the mail in her underwear, he said, suppose a strange man walked in here right now. Without pausing to look up, she said, you are a strange man. After the party crasher insulted his French hostess by saying, your meal was fit for a pig, she smiled a Parisian smile and said, so glad you felt at home. But Marilyn Monroe outdid them all. Asked if she had something on when Joe DiMaggio proposed, she answered with grave innocence, the radio. The shorter the phrase, the keener the wit. The keener the wit, the surer the touch. The surer the touch, the purer the art that knows when one word more would be a word too much. There's also a... This poem is called The Bodies of Women, but it commemorates something in women that men lack. And that is that they have a certain, I'm trying to find the right words, a fierce love for the good of the people that they love. If they do something, if a woman does something for someone she loves, as long as it benefits that person, she doesn't care if she gets credit for it or if people talk about it. She doesn't want a medal. She doesn't want her name on a picture on a stamp or anything like that. That doesn't interest her. That would cheapen it. That would cheapen it. I keep thinking, and this just occurred to me just yesterday, that Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, his mother, Nancy Hanks, died when he was 8 years old. Tom Hanks, by the way, the actor, is descended from Nancy Hanks. At any rate, Lincoln's father, Tom Lincoln, knew he couldn't be a farmer and raise 2 children. She had an older sister named Sarah who died in her teens. So he went back to Kentucky. There was a widow there who had 3 children. He proposed to her. She agreed, and he brought her back to Indiana, and she raised 5 children. And she had a special love for Abraham Lincoln, and he for her. She taught him how to read and write. She gave him the King James Version of the Bible, Pilgrim's Progress, Aesop's Fables. You see that reflected in his speeches, in his 77 years ago. Who says that? We say 87 years ago. That's biblical language, 77 years ago. So is a phrase like, the world may little note nor long remember what we say here, but it cannot forget what they did here. He said that at Gettysburg. So, and Lincoln, by the way, was self-educated. He never went to school except for a few days when he was just a kid. Self-educated. But without her foundation, he could never have been a lawyer. He could never have been a senator. He could never have been a president. And had Lincoln not been president during the Civil War, it's even likely that the whole country would have disbanded and ended, that there would be no union at all. But think about it, all because of one woman, and nobody knows her name. And that's the way she'd like it, by the way, in my opinion. This is the poem, The Bodies of Women. Some say they just reflect the life of the sea and the moon. But life and physiology have never rhymed. Think of the squat queen who tranced Mark Antony and Caesar with her glances to become all Egypt to them both. Or dancers who have spines like spears and walk as if mere walking were a dance. Or nurses in their white, sure, soft shoes, nimble as prancers in motion, and just as self-possessed. Such poise and prowess is the stuff of mystery. And mystery it is. What else but mystery imbues a woman of stature to subdue a mob with nothing but a stance or a stare? Or tells why men or countrymen can languish with their goddess gone. Learning of Piaf's death, Cocteau decided not to live. For what? For a lifelong waif whose voice was France for half a century. And what of Kulthum, who stilled the Arab world each time she sang and drew 4 million to her funeral? Is this bewitchery? Or is it something that will never have a name? Or does it simply mean that women live within their bodies to the end and past the end? Not so for men, who seem to leave their bodies as they age, treating what was once an instrument is now a thing of no or little use. For those whose destination is themselves, what are such failings but a nuisance, not a destiny? Compared to love or happiness or children, they appear at best as vanities. Say for yourselves. The eyes of any woman say it takes more bravery to be and bear than to beget, or finally just be, with no defenses, no illusions, no regrets. This poem is very short. If love's not once and always, all the time, it never happened. Or it's simply waiting. Or it's over. That poem has been constantly misinterpreted I'll say it again. If love's not once and only all the time, it never happened. Or it's still in waiting, or it's over. A final poem is it's called The Ballad of the Old Lovers. It's about two people who have loved one another all their lives. They're now of an old age, and all they want is to continue loving one another as long as they live, as long as possible, and hopefully indefinitely. Your body slowed down, my dearest dear. Your body slowed down, my dearest. It's aging, my dear, just aging. I fear each year I keep growing older. The birds in the trees may never freeze, but the blood as you age grows colder. Remember the days when we used to play and hug on the sheets of the bed there? You'd hug me here and hug me there, and then we would wrestle together. Instead, we lie now like the dead there and listen all night to the weather. Remember the money we managed to save and planned to enjoy in our 60s? Well, 60 has come, and 60 has gone. And what have our savings returned us but travel in season without a good reason, and tropical sunlight that burned us? Remember the friends we knew when we and our friends were younger. Where have they gone? And why don't they write? And why have the decades divided all those not alive from those who survive, no matter how well they're provided? But why blame our fears on the innocent years? They're gone and beyond reliving. Since death's quite efficient and time's insufficient, is it asking too much to forgive us for wanting to stay to the end of the day and love what the years can still give us? So, give me a kiss, my dearest of dears, and sleep by my side forever. Let the years come and let the years go. We treasure what nothing can sever. In touch or apart is the same to the heart. Until death parts us not, we're together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was beautiful. Poets are always concerned with when you know a poem is finished, and Sam has an exceptionally high standard. He says it's finished when it lives in memory. And Sam just celebrated his 96th birthday, and it's just absolutely wonderful. But thank you all once again. We have a few poems to close us out from a wonderful poet, educator, and scholar, Professor Bob Haas. Professor Haas teaches at Penn West University, Edinburgh. He has a wonderful book on Robert Frost called Going by Contraries, and a great book of poetry, Counting Thunder. Haas is the executive director of the Robert Frost Society. So I have some friends in New England who are big into Frost. I like to remind them that the spiritual home of the Robert Frost Society is in Pennsylvania here. I also like to remind my friends from Philadelphia that Pennsylvania has had one poet laureate in its history, and that was Sam Hazo. So I like to lord that over all my Philadelphia friends. Pittsburgh is an incredibly lucky city. But Bob is just a wonderful poet and educator, and I was looking up a poem of his from Poetry Magazine that came out a few months ago, and I stumbled across his Rate My Professor page. I can say with confidence I've never seen such positive reviews from any professor. He is loved and adored by his students. He is adored by Sam, and we're very happy to have him be with us here to read a few poems to close us off. Please join me in welcoming Bob Haas.
Thank you all for being here. Tough to follow Sam Hazo. It's kind of like following the Beatles or Elvis, or with the current generation, maybe Taylor Swift. I mean, incredible. Legend has it that above the stacks in the great library of Alexandria was the inscription, "This is the place for the healing of the soul." And I'd like to think that this great library and the International Poetry Forum itself are the natural heirs to that idea. When I stop to consider all of the wonderful poets that Sam brought to Pittsburgh and look at the way those poets displayed in abundance Plato's virtues, wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice, I really do believe that the Poetry Forum is the natural heir to those kinds of virtues. So I want to thank Sam for bequeathing us this wonderful gift of the International Poetry Forum. I want to thank my friends Mike Aquilina and Janine Molinaro, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to aid Jake. And of course, I want to thank Jake himself for accepting the mantle that Sam has given him as he brings the forum well into this century. So thank you so much for being here. I'm only going to read a few poems because time is limited, but I thought I would start with a poem that reminds us of the difficulty of the world that we live in now. I know this is a celebratory moment, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't remind all of us through poetry that there are those in the world who are not so fortunate as we are here today. And so I'm going to start out with a couple of poems and then end with some more optimistic poems. The first poem is called The Horses of Achilles. It has two parts. If any of you have ever read the Iliad, which is the great poem of war, the great epic poem of war, there's a very tiny passage in the Iliad where, if you know the story, Hector and the Greeks are running amok because Achilles is sulking in his tent. He's withdrawn from the war. And he has become incensed because Agamemnon has insulted him by stealing his spoil of war, who is the slave girl Briseis. So Achilles, even as the Greeks are being slaughtered, refuses to rejoin the battle. And Patroclus, his wonderful acolyte and good friend, cannot bear to see all of these soldiers being killed, and he begs Achilles to rejoin the war. Achilles grants that request, and he lends him his armor and his horses and chariot. The chariot is driven by two horses, one named Xanthus, the other named Balius. And of course, what happens as soon as Patroclus joins the war, the Trojans who are running amok believe that Achilles has rejoined the war, and they converge on Patroclus and they kill him, with Hector delivering the final blow by goring him through the bowels with a spear. In the aftermath, Achilles' horses begin weeping. It's maybe 5 lines in the poem, but I've extended it. And then I've taken it even further into our current day to suggest that these two horses, one of which has been given the gift of speech, have been released from battle, as human beings have not been. So these are the poems. The Horses of Achilles. When they saw Patroclus lying dead, face down in his pool of darkening blood, Achilles' horses knelt, then bowed their heads and wept as humans weep for one so good. Intractable, their great breasts foaming still, they stood like sentinels upon the stage the gods had built and watched the heroes kill, as fate decreed they must for wealth or rage. High in the clouds, immortal Zeus grew sad for his horses, yet like Achilles stayed indifferent to the plight of men whose mad thirst for slaughter would not be allayed. Achilles' horses stomped the bloody earth. All around they heard the piercing cries of men whose severed flesh would soon bring death. Then, moved by pity, they reared up to the skies as if to beg the gods for clemency. But no sign came. Gluttonous for more, fate compelled their bridled loyalty to carry generations into war. And so they wept for death, for tortured soldiers bound to unrelenting pain, while black against the clouds, a lone vulture soared high above the lost Scamander plain. And then this is the Horses of Achilles too. Achilles' horses were gifted to Achilles' father Peleus by Zeus, so they're immortal. So even though they've been released from battle, they continue to live on. And I've sort of imagined in composing this poem that these are two magnificent creatures who have nonetheless been scarred by battle, and memory shakes them. Bereft of purpose now, they stand enclosed behind the barbed wire fences of a field, which holds them in such postures of repose. The scars of countless lashings lie concealed beneath their shaggy manes. And yet their eyes betray behind their glass the look of ancients, who having lived so long have known the rise and fall of nations and the grave impatience of men who lost, as Xanthus once, the gift of measured speech. Impervious to rain and scorching sun, and now no longer swift or strong, they nibble on the green terrain and grow into an elemental peace. Never to clash again, their time has passed. Beyond the reach of hurt, and unlike beasts, their noble natures broaden like the grass. Nothing disturbs them now, or so it seems, save fretful moments when at night they see the shades of men come back to haunt their dreams, or passing convoys waken memory. A couple of new poems. The other day I was driving over French Creek on my way home from class at dusk after teaching Shakespeare. And I happened to look up as I was crossing the bridge, and I saw some little brown bats flying, and for a moment my heart began to turn handsprings. For decades I was a very avid fly fisherman, and I would visit streams, of course, at dusk when mayflies were hatching. And as soon as the mayflies began to hatch, I would see the little brown bats pour out of the trees above the stream. And so they and I together would share the stream, and I always marveled at the beauty of their acrobatic flight. Unfortunately, because of climate change and a fungus called white nose syndrome, 99% of little brown bats in Pennsylvania have been wiped out. The good news is that their colonies seem to be stabilizing. And so it was quite a joyous moment when I looked up and I saw several bats flying, and it inspired this poem. There's a reference in this poem to Felix culpa, which is the Latin phrase for the fortunate fall in Christian theology, the banishment from Eden, which not only gives us the great gift of human consciousness, but also the opportunity to reconcile with our severing from the divine. One curious note about bats is that they're too heavy and their wings are too weak, so that they can't launch themselves from the ground. They have to become airborne by falling. And so as they fall, they spread their wings and then fly. So this is the poem. The bat observes the world mostly upside down, and clinging fast to branch or ledge, lays heaven at its feet, hell at its head, its smiling face inverted into frown. In darker tales, such piercing eyes and fangs made mockery of our mortality. For 2 small drops of blood, how easily so many sold their souls. But this one hangs until a different hunger bids it fly. With wings too weak to launch such heaviness, it has no other choice but to release its grasp on airy height, and so defy the stones below. Unfurling its tucked wings and spreading wide those strong adapted hands, it drops toward earth, risking rising land, then gaining speed and lift begins to sing. O Felix culpa, the ordered world set right, the smile returns, as if its sonar calling were joyful praise for signatures of flight, or gentler hands that fashion all this falling. Like Janine, I have the wonderful fortune of being able to teach Shakespeare, which is always my favorite class to teach. There's a lot of Shakespeare in Sam, of course. Poet Robert Frost says, a poem is only as good as it's dramatic, and when you hear Sam read, the drama always comes through. And so I love that about Shakespeare, and I also love that about Sam's performance and poetry. It's always dramatic. This poem is called Ariel. Ariel is one of the figures who inhabits The Tempest, which is one of Shakespeare's late romances. Ariel is often contrasted with Caliban, who represents the sort of base carnal natures of our humanity, and Ariel, the light and buoyant creative spirit. Ariel has been imprisoned on the island of Illyria by a witch named Sycorax. And when the banished king of Milan, Prospero, lands on the island, he encounters Ariel. And Prospero is a figure in the play who possesses magic, and he has a magic staff. And he actually releases Ariel from the imprisoned state in a cloven pine tree. And so I've imagined the speaker of the poem being Ariel, Prospero as being someone who has released Ariel from that incredible captivity in exchange for the servitude of love. There's an epigraph from The Tempest, which reads, I come to answer thy best pleasure, be it to fly, to swim, or dive into the fire, to ride on the curled clouds, to thy strong bidding task. This is a bit of a muse poem. It's a love poem. So many years ingrained by sycorax, I lost my voice, abandoned all desire to ride the clouds or dive into the fire, where light as ashes, I would ply my tricks of music to make all creations sing. Coy birds and sunsets mocked me with their art. Beyond the surf, I heard the buoys ring those foggy nights when all my limbs would hurt, but nodded as they were in cloven pine. And always I looked outward to the sea, the violent sea, the racked and wretched sea, and waited for some augury or sign that someone might release me from my fate. And then you came. Marooned by your own storms, you huddled in the circle of your arms, and waiting for the howling to abate, by chance looked up and saw me prisoned there. I startled, overthrown by that first look, then stirred to life by kindness and your care, felt arias arising in the dark. My saving dear, by this song may you know that, moved by fancy many storms ago, you touched my tears of pitch, and taking pity, raised up your staff of love and set me free. And one final poem. This is a wintertime poem. When I was a child, I had terrible ear infections, and there was almost nothing, despite many surgeries that could be done because my eustachian tubes were too small. And so whenever I would find myself plagued by ear infections, there was really nothing I could do except wait for my eardrums to burst, and then finally I would feel better. But the pain was excruciating. And of course, during those times, my mother felt helpless to try and come to my aid. My mother, like Sam, was a terrific storyteller. And so she would sit by my bedside and tell me stories while I was in the midst of these bouts of infections. And one of my favorite stories that she always used to tell me were Tarzan stories. So the magnificent man in this poem is Tarzan. And it's a poem about storytelling. It's a poem about how stories heal us. And I tell the story a couple of times, of course, the second time revising it as stories are wont to be revised through generations. There's an allusion to the griot. The griot is the central poet in African tribes who was the keeper of memory, the keeper of tribal mythology, the repository of knowledge about where to find water and food. At one time, the griot and the poet were at the centers of human culture. So this is called the moral of the story. My mother, too, would wake those winter nights when the pain inside my ears would not subside, and gather herself in our January house to find the heating pad and glycerin, which she warmed and dropped in my ears. For a moment, the world would quiet under the oil, and from a great distance, I could hear my mother say how proud she was at how big and brave a boy I had become. But when she saw the glycerin drain away and my face contort in the pre-rupture pain, she knew the old cliches could never save me. So she set out on the story of a man, of a magnificent man who rode the elephant's back, who swung the African canopy limb by limb, and with a yell that shook the continent, gathered the beasts to answer his commands. When I learned the man had set the world right, and the quicksand that could swallow him had dried up in a drought, I no longer felt the pain and fell asleep under a grove of hibiscus. Now when the doctor tells me that my son has ears whose inner bones are shaped like mine, and no miracle pill will cure the pain he feels, I know I can do little but hold him while he rides out his infection. Tonight, I'll find the heating pad, warm the glycerin, and tell my son how proud I am at how big and brave a boy he has become. But when he sees for the first time I am flawed because I cannot ease his throbbing pain, I will set out on the story of a man, of a magnificent man who broke the big croc's back, who swam the Nile and stared the lion down until the sound he hears is not the sound of aortal blood beating in his ears, but the sound of the griots gathered at the feast, telling their tales of the magnificent man to the beat of their tribal drums. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again to Bob. Bob is working on this mammoth project, the collected letters of Robert Frost with Harvard University Press, so do keep your eyes out for that project. Thank you all so much again for being a part of this. I am a person who can honestly say that poetry saved my life, and I think of why that is. I think of my teachers, and I ask my teachers, many of whom I have asked why they love poetry, and so many of them mention the name of Sam. So this is just such a wonderful experience being here to bring this back. Thank you to the board. Thank you for all of our supporters. If you would like to make a donation to support our efforts, the books and the cards you have a QR code on the website where our information is. We're a 501c3 organization, so you can make a tax-deductible contribution. We are incredibly grateful for all of your support. So thank you once again to Bob, to everyone here, and to Sam for a beautiful performance. And welcome back.